there's a funny quip about building a business, right? Which is that at the moment you start your business, you wear every single hat in the business. And your job as CEO is to hand those hats to other people as the business grows, to people that might not even be better at doing those things than you, but people whose time is better suited to taking on those tasks.
Hey, welcome back to the 7-Figure Music School podcast. Today we are joined by Jeff Homer of Ensemble Schools. And I'm excited to talk to Jeff today because Jeff owns 37 music schools. And he owns this many schools because he has bought or acquired these schools over the past few years. So today we're going to dive into what Jeff has learned, and I would cover what you can learn from this as well. So welcome, Jeff. Glad you're on.
Yeah, thanks for being here. I've been following the podcast since you guys launched, and I'm excited to be a part of it.
Cool. So I want to jump into my first question right off. Give us a breakdown on the schools that you own. What are the sizes of these schools that you own? Range from small to large.
Sure. So our smallest schools track our smallest markets. So we have a few schools that have maybe like 120 to 150 students. And $250,000 to $300,000 of revenue. And those are typically schools we acquired sort of early on. Today, our floor, for schools that we're looking to acquire is usually $400,000 or $500,000 of revenue. Which is somewhere between 200 and 300 students, depending on pricing. And our largest schools, which is sort of fun given the name of your podcast, we actually own 5 7-figure music schools, independent brands that do 7 figures of revenue. Excited to feature them on the podcast.
Yes. How many of those 5 were over 7 figures when you got them? Were they already there?
All of them.
Nice.
So we've definitely been successful in growing, most of the schools that we've acquired. And that's sort of part of our, that's part of our commitment to the folks that sold us those schools, is that we're going to take good care of the communities that they've worked really hard to build, and that we're going to use our sort of scale and resources behind the scenes to grow and just welcome new people into that community. But in terms of the magic line in the sand, we've all 5 of the schools were there when we bought them, and have continued to succeed under our ownership.
Okay. So I think one of the things that we want to explore in this conversation today is just what separates a 7-figure school like that from a school that's much smaller. And something I've heard you say is that there are 2 things that schools typically underinvest in. One is scaled processes, one is marketing. And I'd like to maybe just first start by having you unpack that. What do you mean when you say that schools underinvest in, especially scaled processes? I think people understand the idea of marketing and what that entails. But even for me, I know that can be a really loaded statement. And to speak, in Nate's terms, that's the third bucket area. Like, what do you mean when you say that they underinvest in scaled processes?
Sure. So let's just take a step back and think about, what is $1 million of revenue for a music school, right? So depending on, so for most of our schools, we're in suburbs of major markets. We're charging, somewhere between $80 and $100 an hour for music lessons. For our schools, $1 million of revenue is between 450 to 500 students a week, right? I know that both you guys have very successful group programs and camps and things like that. That's not something that's been an emphasis at many of the schools we've acquired. And so, for us, we're mostly doing weekly private lessons. That's the core of our business. And we like the recurring nature of that and that kind of rock solid bond between the student and teacher. That's what we think of as being the core of our business. So 450, 500 students, call it 500 to use a round number, right? So we have 500 students that are coming to our studio every week. That means we have 25 to 30 teachers at those schools, given the size of that. That means almost every day someone's calling out, or coming late, or, there's something wrong. Like almost every week someone's making an availability change. Almost every month one of those teachers is turning over. Like all of the things that you guys have talked about in prior sort of more operationally intensive episodes, they're happening at an incredibly fast or high frequency. And that's just because of scale. And, almost every day there's an upset parent about something. Almost like the velocity of the business is just higher. And so what it requires is having a really competent administrative staff that is big enough to handle that. I looked this up so that I could give you this number, but we spend an average of $200,000 on administrative staff at our 7-figure music schools. And it's because we need that first line of defense to take care of those day-to-day things that just happen so much so that we can actually run the business. And so that's where it starts, right? Is like, these things are going to happen all the time, and you can't deal with them ad hoc. They can't be just sort of, we can't fly by the seat of our pants doing this. And in some ways, it's almost the reverse causation, right? The frequency forces us to get used to doing them, to processize these things, to push them further down in the organization so that, anybody who sits at the desk can handle any of these sort of daily things anytime. So it's almost sort of, reverse causation in some ways. But that's what I mean, is that just the idea that the owner is going to have a one-to-one relationship with every parent is not possible at that scale. And so we need to push it farther down in the business. And that's what scale process means to me.
I want to kick it over to Nate here in a second, but Jeff, you're telling me that you're not on the phone on Sunday nights scheduling makeup lessons for these schools? I'm kidding, of course, but
yeah.
So let me make sure that I'm understanding before I kick it over to Nate. So when you're saying investing in scaled processes, you're not talking about investment in, an employee handbook, though that is part of it. You're really talking about investing in the team that automates the school.
I think all of the above, right? So we need a high quality desk staff that's capable of taking what comes on a daily basis, right? They are really good at their jobs. And we really value them for being really good at their jobs, because it's a special type of person that can sit at a desk where the phone rings constantly, right? With great things, right? I want to sign up for lessons. I want to do this. We're having a great time. There's lots of really positive things that are happening, but the velocity is really high. And so you need a high capacity person that's going to be able to do that. And high capacity people are valuable, and, we have to pay them. So no, I think there's that. And then there's standardization, right? So when you have a team like that, handoff from person, no one person can hold all that stuff in their head, right? There's going to be handoff from person to person. And that's where the standardization comes. As soon as you get to the business where either you personally as the owner or the general manager as an individual can no longer perform all of the main functions as one person, you need to standardize, right? You need to have a next man up mentality where the next person who comes in and sits in the seat knows what happened previously and is able to recognize, because the process is standardized, what has happened, what needs to happen, what to do when something comes up, and then how to communicate that at the end of their shift so that the team can function as an individual would for a smaller school.
I love that you're just throwing out numbers like you do, because I know that's one of your superpowers. You're a numbers person. And so I love that you're like, we invest on average $200K in admin staff for a 7-figure music school. I was literally just looking at the Brooklyn Music Factory 5-year comps on our admin line, and we're at about 26% on average of our gross that goes to admin. And it's always a push me, pull me between the cost of labor or the amount we're spending in direct costs to the teachers versus that support admin. I feel like I'm constantly trying to balance that, trying to figure out what percentage goes to direct costs like teachers versus what percentage goes to these, high capacity admin people that are, like you're right, are essential to running a great sustainable music school. I'm curious, just in all your conversations with the GMs, et cetera, at these 5 7-figure music schools, is that push me, pull me? Is that a common theme that you guys wrestle with between understanding your cost of labor percentage versus your admin percentage?
So something that is different about Ensemble in this context is that we have a corporate layer, right? We have a an ensemble set of shared services that we offer to our schools. And I was not counting that figure when I was thinking about what the cost of the staff at the school is. So we provide heavy duty marketing, recruiting, teacher recruiting, and sort of hiring, onboarding, finance, accounting, payroll, tax, compliance, and IT services to the schools, right? So that's part of kind of our brand promise, if you will, at the ensemble level to a seller is, hey, we're going to take this wonderful school that you have. We're going to keep all the people that are there today. We're going to equip them with these really great resources to maximize the success of the school going forward. I'm not counting any of those things. And, Nate, you and I have talked briefly about your school at a high level. My understanding is that you have, dedicated marketing people and like this. So like that's cost that's extra. That's, that's not accounted for in that 200K that I'm talking about. I'm talking about just bodies at the desk. So I think it's a lot more. Yep. I think, the relationship we try to have with our schools is very clear cut, where we are trying to provide them with everything they need for their job to be customer service driven, right? Take care of the people that walk through your door, students, parents, teachers. If you do a good job of taking care of their needs, we can do everything else that you're looking for. And so that's kind of the division of labor that we put in place. And so, of course there's a push and pull where every GM wants more staff, right? I need more staff. I'm so busy, and so there's definitely that. When we sit down and we think about, okay, what times of day, what's causing this, what can we do? Like, and that's where process gets built, right? It's like, because we can throw more bodies at this. But we can also think about what is the root cause of the problem that we're having. Where are our bottlenecks? Where is our slack capacity? How do we time shift work away from peak hours? How do we, otherwise remove, problems that we're having? And then to me, our last resort is to throw a body at a problem because one, it's expensive, but two, it's a lost opportunity to increase the capacity of the business through process and standardization.
We've kind of gotten into the weeds here. I want to pull it back up to the 50,000 foot level because we talked about investing in scaled processes, and you gave some really good thinking around that. I want to talk about investing in the marketing side of things because, again, you said that barriers to reaching that 7-figure level are often because there's an underinvestment in team and scale processes. There's also an underinvestment in marketing. And I have a hunch of what you're going to say, but your experience is going to be invaluable here. So maybe give some ideas as to what it means to underinvest on the marketing side of things, whether that's simple or complex. We'd love to hear it.
Sure. So I'm going to start by referring everyone back to your Marketing Big Three or your Google Big Three episode. That is 90% of our secret sauce. We think we do it really well. There's some stuff we do in those buckets that's probably not accessible to, every listener, but like that is the playbook, so go listen to Daniel. He gave you thousands of dollars worth of advice for free on the podcast. Maybe you guys can link to that. But I think, the most common issue is irrespective of the level of marketing budget, and it's usually very low. It's not uncommon for us to see a very arbitrary, budget that's very small relative to the size of the school. But the problem is the budget is arbitrary. There's no thought to what should my marketing budget be, right? That's not a muscle that school owners have. And marketing feels like a black hole. You dump money in it, you get some stuff back. You're not sure what's working, right? Like 50% of my marketing is wasted. I just don't know which half. Like these are common problems in the marketing world.
Yeah.
And there is a framework for thinking about what that should be. And it starts with what is my customer worth and what does it cost to acquire them, right? That's sort of a fundamentals from the world of subscription services, right? So in a way, we're selling a subscription service for most of our products, right? You pay by the month, you come every month until you tell us otherwise. And so, the subscription software world thinks about what does it cost to acquire a customer? What is that customer worth over time? And, we can get to the heart of that question, and it will tell us what we should be spending on marketing, because we're going to know what our payback is from a new student. We're going to know how many students we get per dollar, for every incremental dollar we invest. And we can watch that change as we increase the budget, right? Because naturally the incremental client is harder to find. It's harder to get in front of them. It's more expensive. They're less likely to convert, and so our acquisition cost will grow the more money we spend on marketing. But we're starting from a place where the starting value of the customer is so much higher than what we pay to acquire them, that we start increasing the budget until we find the place where, to us, the return on marketing spend is where we'd like it to be. But it's usually incredibly high. I mean, our estimate of customer lifetime value for our businesses is between $2,000 and $3,000 of gross profit, not of revenue, gross profit. And we can typically acquire a customer using mostly Daniel's frameworks for between $200 and $300, right? That is a 10x return on marketing spend. There is almost nowhere else in the world you can deposit $1 and get $10 back with relative confidence at relative scale. And yet we as school owners don't look into this bucket because it's not pedagogy, it's not fun, it's not our area of expertise. And as a result, it gets sort of ignored, or it gets relegated to a bucket that's like, I know I should be doing some of this. Here's some, right? Here's some budget. And that's the end of it, right? Is we hire somebody, they tell us it's going to be X a month to do this, we pay X a month, and we just never think about it again. And in terms of, if you're serious about growing your studio and getting to, the 7-figure level or whatever goal, might be appropriate, marketing has to be part of that equation, right? How are we going to get new students in the door? I mean, our current student population is fundamentally a leaky bucket, right? Some of them are going to quit at some point, right? They're not all going to stay with us forever. And so new student acquisition has to be part of that conversation of it's almost it's the only determining factor of whether we're going to get to a 7-figure music school. We have to develop processes to serve those students once we get them, but we have to get them first. And that's just not a muscle that I've encountered frequently from school owners when I've talked to them.
Now, when you acquire these schools, more than likely they're already doing marketing of some kind. Would you say that the margin is there already in the school to do that, to make that investment, to increase that spend? Or is there something that you're doing when you acquire a school that gives you more margin or gives you more room to play with,
Sure. I mean, we do think that we're better at this on average because there's a few reasons for that, right? We have some built-in advantages, right? So because we have 37 schools, we have some SEO, search engine optimization advantages that single schools will not have, right? So we are sort of tied together in the eyes of Google, and that gives us, sort of a little bit, allows our individual schools to punch above their weight. That's not replicable. We have all the data in terms of targeting and conversions and that sort of thing that we have across our schools. So when we spin up a new school, we're not starting from scratch. We're starting from, 95% of the way there with a little bit of local tweaking that's needed to really dial it in. But it's an optimization, right? Our typical, we're probably 2 to 5xing the previous owner's marketing budget and doing so with glee. I get that money, comes out of the owner's, paycheck, right? It's money that would otherwise they'd be taking home to their family. So I get that it's a scary thing, but it's so small in comparison to the potential that it generates. And so, I can think of a few times where, there were owners that were doing things that, maybe were less effective than we would have liked. And, we kind of kept the marketing budget the same, but maybe improved the mix of marketing spend. But, we're almost always spending tens of thousands of dollars more than the outgoing owner on marketing, and doing so with really good results.
If you could give one piece of advice to a school, let's say that's at the 100 to 200 student level, that would perhaps that owner's thinking in their head, man, I'd love for Jeff to buy my school someday. What advice would you give to them around the marketing bucket on how to make their school more desirable for you?
they just need to grow the school, right? So they need to spend the money, not because we're going to inherit those marketing processes. To be honest with you, we're going to rip them out on the day that we close.
Yeah.
But it's more around just getting to the size that is going to maximize value for them, right? I mean, whether it's selling to us or we're selling to selling to a teacher or selling to somebody in their local market, right? These are all common ways that schools, when owners are approaching retirement age or relocating or choosing to focus on family or other business interests, there's lots of reasons why these change hands. It's in order to maximize value to any seller or buyer, excuse me. We want to grow the school, and I think it's the piece of advice that you're asking for would be to set aside a meaningful amount of money relative to the school, and that can mean whatever it means to you. It might be a few $1,000s, might be as much as $10,000, and just try it. Right? Set aside that money, write it off as an experiment in your mind, and see what you get. And I think, generally speaking, you'll be shocked by the number of leads that come in, and you'll consider it an absolute no-brainer to continue spending that money in the future.
That is just a perfect concept. And I'll even add this before I kick it over to Nate, that there's a lot of schools that are smaller that come to grow your music studio. And they have some trepidation even in investing in their own growth as a business person and marketer. What I've typically seen is that if they're willing to invest in themselves, that's exactly what they get back, is more leads, more students, and the better marketing overall. The messaging work we do with them, all those sorts of things, end up leading to them giving people a better experience as they grow their school, which means that those kids stay longer, so the retention's better. Yeah, any investment in marketing is going to pay you back. And I'll add to that any investment that could include improving your own skills as a marketer, because that's the job of the school owner at the very beginning. It's one of the last things that you have to give up.
One of the hesitations is, or can be, what are we doing this for, right? Like, why am I trying to grow the studio? Is it just for me? And I think there are so many advantages to having a growing community for the members of the community, right? It is absolutely a positive for the teachers to have really good marketing so that we can make sure that their schedules are full. So that when we hire a new teacher, we're able to give them a lot of work, very quickly and get them on board and get them, earning a living out of the box. It is absolutely a positive for other students to see new students coming into the studio and having success and having a good time and, being potential partners in chamber music or, rock bands or, other, performance opportunities, or just the community. The growth of the community is a positive into itself, even if it were not a financial benefit to the school. Obviously it is. It's a huge benefit. And it's more so because of the operating leverage that exists in a music school, meaning there's a relatively high percentage of fixed costs. So the incremental student is much more profitable than the prior student, because you've already paid for your space and your admin and all that kind of stuff, and you're just paying the teacher for the incremental amount of time. But there are benefits to growing the community that are worth it for themselves and for the teaching staff in particular. And so, if we want to be the best music school we can be to attract the best teachers we can have, marketing is an important part of attracting good teachers and being able to fill their schedules and having a reputation for, hey, I joined X school. I already have 25 students. I'm really happy. I'm thinking about adding more time. That is how we market in the teacher community. And I think that's probably an underappreciated benefit of being really good at this kind of stuff.
I'm curious if you wouldn't mind giving, what's the percentage of gross that you think a healthy school is allocating towards marketing? I sort of know what the national average is, but I'm curious where you guys have landed, if you've got that digit.
Yeah, I'm doing some quick math in my head. My guess is across our business, we're averaging 5 or 6%. I could check that for you, but that's my gut feeling, is that that's about where we are. His percent of gross is about $5,000 or $6,000, or 5 or 6%. Sorry, many thousands of dollars.
Yeah. That can be super helpful, because that helps a smaller school who's got, say, $100,000 in gross a year think, okay, wait, can I really afford to spend $5,000? And you're really saying you can't afford not to spend $5,000 a year.
It's actually probably the smaller the school, the higher the percentage, right? So, we're not,
that's exactly what I was going to say.
Yeah. No, I like we don't have any schools where we're spending less than $20,000 a year on marketing. That's like our base budget, right? So, it's 10% for the schools that are in the kind of 300K range. Because we want to get them out of there.
That's super helpful.
We want to grow the school past that level.
Yeah. I think, we've talked about bucket 3, we've talked about bucket 1 and how schools often underinvest. I think this is really where this whole conversation has been driving to. And as we, Jeff, as you and I were trading emails prior to recording the podcast, we talked about, hey, what could we focus on? And this is really the question I have then. What do you think makes a school reach 7 figures? How do you even categorize that in your head? Is there a checklist of success factors or habits of the owner? Do they, meditate every day? Do they get up at 5 a.m.? Like, what do you see as common characteristics between these schools that you all own, that Ensemble owns, that have reached 7 figures? I'm curious.
Sure. So there's 2 buckets I'm going to put stuff into, right? There's things that are kind of fixed at the moment you start the school, which are important and have a high impact on the probability of success, but which are really hard to change once you get started, right? So things that are in that bucket are size of market, right? It's going to be really hard to run a 7-figure music school in a town of 50,000 people, right? It's going to be hard to find enough 100%. Teachers. It's going to be hard to find it. So that's an important one. There's also sort of a product market fit question, right? So are you offering something that the local community is looking for in a way that doesn't require a huge amount of education of the populace, right? So, for us, even the kind of the genres that are emphasized differ a little bit around the country, right? For some of our like Northern California markets, parents are looking for classical music education for their kids, right? We could start a rock band program. It would be really fun. I'm sure that the kids would get a lot of value with that, but it would require an incredible investment in educating those parents of why they should be looking for this, right? Instead, we can just respond to their natural instinct of what they're looking for, and that's going to differ across. So there's a product market fit question of like, are we trying to create demand for something, or are we responding to demand that already exists? And particularly given that, many school owners are not the best marketers and have not made the investments that we think they could be making, product market fit is often one of the major drivers of how people get there without marketing, right? Is because they have a product, it's in a market that's big enough, with enough students that are looking for music lessons, where word of mouth and just a great experience, which most school owners are great at delivering, right? Like bucket 2, bucket 4, these are not usually challenges for school owners. So the schools that got there without tremendous success in the other buckets got there through, the right market that didn't have a ton of competition, where they were offering something they were looking for. And, that can be done through market research and whatever. But like at the moment you open your doors, it's sort of fixed. And then the last one is building size, right? So unfortunately, we can only run about 80 students through a studio room every week, right? I mean, we have some markets where we do better with things like homeschool and adult students to lengthen the lesson day, outside of kind of 2 to 8, 3 to 9, whatever it is in your area. But fundamentally, I consider kind of the prime times to be, Monday to Thursday, 2 to 8, Saturday, 9 to 3. That's 30 hours a week. That's 60 students. That's gonna govern how many kids we can run through the building in a week. And obviously, I know that both of you have great, group programs, and there's ways of getting at that. But anyway, so those are kind of the structural factors that I think are important, and maybe are, unfortunately they're not as controllable once you get in there, but like they do matter, right? And so some of those things might determine whether 7 figures is the right goal for someone to have, right? It may not be possible in a in a 4-room studio in a smaller town in, wherever, right? But that doesn't mean we can't have a really wonderful, profitable business. But, and then on the operations side, it goes back to what we kind of said in relation to the first question you asked me, which is the velocity of these schools is really high. And can you handle it, right? Does your customer experience decline as the number of students grows such that you plateau around wherever your operational bottleneck exists, right? Because if things like churn start to increase as we get more students and they have a worse experience, such that our return on marketing spend starts to decrease, such that like some of our things start to get out of whack, like there are operational constraints that might limit the reasonable ceiling in terms of number of schools because the experience declines. Phone's not answered, schedule's wrong, I made a billing mistake, like I'm frustrated, right? And the level of frustration, can increase with the number of students. And so that's where bucket 3 to me comes in. And, we can't get there without bucket 1, meaning, if we don't market to students, we won't grow to that level. But if we can't manage that number of students once we get there, it won't last. We'll turn around and we'll go the other direction, and we'll have tarnished our reputation in doing that, right? There'll be a lot of people out there that have had a negative experience with our schools. And so I think of Ensemble as a bucket 3 business, right? That is what we do. We find schools that have established, that have really established reputations and wonderful communities and great people. And, we help install infrastructure for growth, and then we power that growth through marketing. And so I think what that comes down to is making sure that, the desk is appropriately staffed for the number of people, that desk staff is empowered. And we talked about that earlier, so that they don't have to check with, you, the owner at every moment to get things done. They can, which also takes more time, right? Hang up the phone. I'll check with the owner. Got to get the owner. Oh, the owner's somewhere else. I didn't pick up the phone. Can't answer. Oh, I forgot. Oh, so improving speed of decision at the moment of client interaction has all these downstream benefits in terms of reducing the amount of work it takes to actually serve that client. And so making sure that whoever is at the desk feels empowered to make decisions, has a framework for making those decisions, is getting regular feedback on decisions and improving them as they go, will result, as the school grows, in you reaching 500 students with a rockstar team, right? They'll have built their muscles as we grew the student base, and we'll get to that level with, 3 to 5 people that are really good at what they do and are able to deliver that experience at scale. And, some of it is getting the owner out of the way, right? Like it can't go through you, if 7 figures is your aspiration, you have to have proxies. You already know you can't teach all the students, right? You're going to have people teach them for you. And you also can't, right, handle all the admin stuff yourself. You're going to have to get to come to peace with that as well. And so that, I think, is, it's about creating processes, getting buy-in from the staff on those processes, and then letting them run the business, and trusting that they care, that they're going to make decisions with the best of intentions, that they're going to get it right 90% of the time, and that we're going to live with the 10% as a cost of running the business in this way, and that most of the mistakes, in air quotes, in that bucket are not going to cost very much, and they're going to be in the client's favor, right? More likely than not, they're going to give a makeup that maybe we wouldn't have wanted them to give, or they're going to refund a month of tuition. They're going to take the client-friendly approach, and that's probably the right decision the right way to err anyway. So I think it comes down to, the staff having what they, having processes for running the school and being allowed to go do it.
Jeff, we hear this all the time from our listeners who are just trying to figure out how to build team. And it seems to me like you're essentially like, for anybody who's listening, you need to rewind tape and write down a whole pile of what Jeff said. Because he even just for a moment touched on that inventory piece when he drops a bomb, like you can do 80 students per week when you're maximizing a single studio. He's basically doing a lot of the work for us. He's saying, look, doesn't matter whether you're a 3-studio school or a 10-studio school. Here's what your inventory is, right? It's a really important piece, but you're also getting into this idea of just like, what does it mean to actually begin to have a team that can take a lot of the burden off you as the owner or the founder and allow you to go in the lane that's really energizing for you yourself. Which brings me back to a question Daniel just asked. He sort of touched on it briefly. And I'm really curious about sort of personality traits. Can you give us like 2 or 3 personality traits? Like, what do you find in these owners that gives them the strength to actually move from a place of trying to control everything to only controlling what matters in their role?
But one of my favorite questions to ask an owner for myself is, what do you do day to day, and what does your staff do, right? Because to me, that's really revealing about what I'm going to have to face when I get in the seat, right? So when it's on us instead of on them, how are we going to what are we going to be up against, right? What is the capacity of the staff today to run the business, and what has the owner delegated to them, and what are we going to have to work to build, either process or just personal skills, or whatever that ends up being. But what are we going to have to be responsible for on day one, and where is the staff starting from? And I think there is a necessity of letting go in getting to a business of this size, where, and I mentioned it before kind of flippantly, but like, it's not possible to do it all yourself. And for some people, that's a really frightening fact, right? And they want to keep the school at a level where it feels manageable, it feels personable. They have a really strong presence, and they're very visible in the community. Those are personality traits that will lead an owner to have maybe a really wonderful experience. Maybe that's exactly the type of business they want to run, and that's okay. But in terms of, the difference between that owner who held on really tight, wanted to make sure that everybody had a great experience personally, and the owner who moved on to being a CEO of a business instead of a sole proprietor, they had to let other people take those jobs, right? There's a funny quip about building a business, right? Which is that at the moment you start your business, you wear every single hat in the business. And your job as CEO is to hand those hats to other people as the business grows, to people that might not even be better at doing those things than you, but people whose time is better suited to taking on those tasks. And ultimately, your job is to hand off the last hat, right? To hand off the CEO hat at the end of the journey. And, we hope to be a capable recipient of that hat, and to do a good job in that role. But that mindset of, my business is growing, my personal capacity is not, I'm going to need help. How do I find help in these areas? It's going to give me leverage on my time. That is a growth mindset, and in some ways sort of a belief in the ability of others to see a vision and to identify with it, and to also work really hard in that same direction. And that to me is the owners that made it.